When the American Civil War began in 1861, President Abraham Lincoln spoke of the conflict as concerning the preservation of the Union, rather than it being about the abolition of slavery. Though he did not like slavery, Lincoln knew that the Northerners and border slave states would not support abolition as a war aim. However, by mid-1862, thousands of slaves had fled to the North to join the army, and Lincoln became convinced that abolition had become both a good military strategy and a morally correct path. On September 22, 1862, Lincoln issued the Preliminary Proclamation, and on January 1, 1863, he issued the Emancipation Proclamation. Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation in two parts. The first part was known as the Preliminary Proclamation. The Preliminary Proclamation outlined the intent of the Emancipation Proclamation and stated that the rebelling states had 100 days to rejoin the Union, or Lincoln would free all the slaves in the rebelling states. He drafted the Preliminary Proclamation to warn the South and to allude to the Emancipation Proclamation. Both Lincoln and his advisers, however, decided that they had to wait for a Union victory before they could deliver the Preliminary Proclamation. You see, the Union wasn't doing very well in the war so far, and Lincoln felt that he needed a Union victory before issuing the Preliminary Proclamation, because then his decision would look positive and strong. The Battle of Antietam was not technically a Union win, but since Lee had called his troops back and his invasion of the North had come to a stop, the battle was good enough for Lincoln to issue the Preliminary Proclamation. The Emancipation Proclamation was a document written by Lincoln in the early 1860s. The Emancipation Proclamation declared that all slaves in the rebelling states were now free. This is what it said.
On the first day of January, all persons held as slaves within any state or designated part of a state, the people whereof shall then be in rebellion against the United States, shall be then, thenceforward, and forever free.
It did not apply to the Union slave states of Maryland, Delaware, Missouri, and Kentucky, because Lincoln did not want to upset those states that were already a part of the Union. Also, Tennessee, New Orleans, and counties of Virginia that were forming West Virginia were not named because they were under Union control. The 10 affected states that were listed in the Emancipation Proclamation were South Carolina, Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, Texas, Virginia, Arkansas, and North Carolina. Overall, the Emancipation Proclamation applied to 3.1 million of the 4 million slaves in the United States. The Emancipation Proclamation was issued on January 1, 1863, 100 days after the Preliminary Proclamation. This was the second and final part by Lincoln, and declared all slaves to be permanently free in the areas that had not yet returned to the Union by January 1, 1863, and therefore were still in rebellion. It changed the focus of the war. Now, instead of a war to restore the Union and a fight for states' rights, it became a war where the North was now fighting to create a new Union without slavery. It turned a civil war into a war over slavery. It was like Northern propaganda. The Emancipation Proclamation also authorized the recruitment of African Americans as Union soldiers, and annulled the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, which said that any free man who came across a runaway slave must return it to its owner. It did not, however, compensate owners, outlaw slavery, or make ex-slaves citizens. This political cartoon here, known as Lincoln's Last Card, demonstrates Abraham Lincoln playing the Emancipation Proclamation as his last card. This is because Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation as just a war tactic and nothing else. Lincoln considered the Emancipation Proclamation as the crowning achievement of his presidency. Overall, The Emancipation Proclamation essentially changed the Civil War itself. The Emancipation Proclamation had a huge impact and many effects. It outraged Southerners for many reasons. Europe was close to helping the Confederacy and officially recognizing the Confederacy, but the Emancipation Proclamation stopped them from doing that because it made the war look like a fight over slavery, which Europe could not support since they were against and had abolished slavery. If they did help the South, it would look like they supported slavery, which they couldn't do. It represented a major step toward the ultimate abolition of slavery, as Lincoln hoped by adding the ending of slavery as a goal of the war. The Emancipation Proclamation turned foreign popular opinion in favor of the Union. Lincoln had spent New Year's Day putting the finishing touches on the document and finally transmitted the text of the Emancipation Proclamation over the telegraph wires. When the word of the Emancipation Proclamation spread to all the slaves, it caused hopes of freedom, general confusion, and encouraged thousands of slaves to escape to the Union. Although it did not free any at first, the Emancipation Proclamation freed about 20,000 slaves. Booker T. Washington wrote in his autobiography in 1865,
As the great day drew nearer, there was more singing in the slave quarters than usual. It was bolder, had more ring, and lasted later into the night. Most of these verses of them plantation songs had some reference to freedom. Some men who seemed to be a stranger, a United States officer, I presume, made a little speech and then read a little longer paper. The Emancipation Proclamation, I think.
After the reading, we were told that we were all free and we could go when and where we pleased. My mother, who was standing by my side, leaned over and kissed her children, while tears of joy ran down her cheeks. She explained to us what it all meant, that this day was the day for which she had been so long praying, but fearing that she would never live to see.
The Emancipation Proclamation paved the way for African Americans to fight for their freedom. This primary source here was created in 1865 and depicts emancipation from a free man's point of view. Since the Emancipation Proclamation allowed slaves to fight in the U.S. Army, it gave the North additional manpower, which was significant in winning the war, whereas the Confederacy did not allow African American soldiers in its army until a month before they were defeated. Lincoln's intentions for writing the Emancipation Proclamation were because it was a necessary war measure. He wrote to Major General John McClernand a few days after issuing the proclamation. He wrote,
After the commencement of hostilities, I struggled nearly a year and a half to get along without touching the institution, and when finally I conditionally determined to touch it, I gave 100 days fair notice of my purpose to all the states and people, within which time they could have turned it wholly aside by simply again becoming good citizens of the United States. They chose to disregard it, and I made the peremptory proclamation on what appeared to me to be a military necessity, and being made, it must stand.
It is true that Lincoln did not like slavery, but that is not why he wrote the Emancipation Proclamation. Lincoln wrote the Emancipation Proclamation to make slavery a new focus and goal of the war. He wrote it in hopes of reuniting the Union. In fact, Lincoln's main focus during the war was preserving the Union. In 1862, Lincoln said,
If there be those who would not save the Union unless they could at the same time save slavery, I do not agree with them. If there be those who would not save the Union unless they could at the same time destroy slavery, I do not agree with them. My paramount object in this struggle is to save the Union, and is not either to save or destroy slavery. If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing all the slaves, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing some and leaving others alone, I would also do that.
For Lincoln, issuing the Emancipation Proclamation was simply a war measure. He didn't even intend for the Emancipation Proclamation to apply once the fighting was over. He just hoped that it would help save the Union, which it did.
Did you know the Emancipation Proclamation was never challenged in court? Did you know that approximately 180,000 African Americans had served in the Union Army and 18,000 in the Navy?
Did you know that a condition of a state's admittance into the Union was that its Constitution provide for the gradual abolition of slavery? This, however, did not apply to the counties forming in West Virginia.
What? I'm gonna free the slaves, only got a feather pen in my pocket. I'm writing up a proclamation, this'll save the Union. Now walk up to the South like, what up, this is your last chance. Telling you now, 100 days in advance. Sick of this world, getting so dang bloody. The people like,
Dang, that's a divided country.
by 1863, you better come back to you. Get back to the Union, or things will get ugly. From right here in DC, I'ma make a slave free. Cross the border and escape when they hear my decree. But hey, you got 100 days.
Now Lincoln's an abolitionist, but slavery, he hated it. But even if the slaves are in the Union, he preserving it. This war ain't about slavery, but that's how he will make it seem. Playing the last card, necessary war measure, yeah.
Need a Union victory. Need a Union victory. Not for real, ask my advisors. When can we expect to win?
December 22nd, after Antietam. It's a task, but we drove Lee out of Maryland.
I gave the South a warning, the South ignored my warning. I didn't talk to Congress, cause I'm the freaking president. Hello, Britain, French, you gotta go. I can have your help in this rebellion, heck no.
Throwing moral values, it's a battle strategy. The Europeans be like,
I ain't supporting slavery.
I'm gonna free the slaves, only got a feather pen in my pocket. I'm writing up a proclamation, this'll save the Union. I'm gonna free the slaves, only got a feather pen in my pocket. I'm writing up a proclamation, this'll save the Union. What you know about ending a revolution?
what you knowin' about saving a whole nation?
I'm saying.
I'm spreading the propaganda. One man's slave, that's another man's nightmare.
Thank you, Southern states, for donating their slaves to all black grace, because right now the liberated liberate.
He's in the Capitol. You can find him sending.
I'm not sleeping till you get the message.
Mississippi, Florida, Georgia, Texas, Louisiana, Alabama, Arkansas, Virginia, North and South Carolina.
I take it easy on the counties in West Virginia.
Forget the borders, they got slaves, but they're still with us.
They'd be like,
Oh, we won. What happens next?
I'm like, yo, I'm working on it.
The 13th edition will enforce the abolition. Only 20,000 free by the proclamation. I call that Lincoln closing a deal. Yeah, I call that Lincoln fixing a nation. We're finally done with war, and now the southern states have got to listen up, because that's what we fought for.
People can come take a look through my telescope, trying to win a war with me. Man, you really won't. Man, you really won't.
Lincoln, freeing slaves. Yeah.
I'm gonna free the slaves, only got a feather pen in my pocket. I'm writing up a proclamation, this'll save the Union.
My men are running cold, this war has gotta go. I'm in the Capitol, thinking up a different goal. My men are running cold.
Oh, no.
This war has gotta go.
No, come on, man.
I'm in the Capitol, thinking up a different
Let's go.
goal.
I'm gonna free the slaves, only got a feather pen in my pocket. I'm writing up a proclamation, this'll save the Union.